Hello and welcome to the Oregonian Sports Podcast. I am Bill Oram, joined per the usual by Brenna Greene from Coin 6. Brenna, good morning.
Good morning.
So the Oregon men just went final in their first game in the Big Ten tournament, dispatching the Indiana Hoosiers by the score of 72-59. The Ducks march on in Indianapolis. March on.
Thank you so much for the most obvious pun of all time. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So here's where we're going to start, though. It's not with March Madness. It's not with college basketball. There's plenty of time for that. The best time of year is upon us.
Mm-hmm.
Brenna, I was watching the Portland Trail Blazers on my television set last night. I literally screamed when public address announcer Mark Mason announced who was singing the national anthem. Natalie Gilbert, who quite famously froze as a 13-year-old singing the national anthem in 2003 and was comforted and encouraged by then Blazers coach Maurice Cheeks, was back. She was this anthem singer for the game last night against the New York Knicks. Mo Cheeks is now an assistant coach for the Knicks. And she crushed it. She crushed the anthem. It was wonderful. And Brenna, I just cannot express to you how much I loved this moment. How much I loved that the Blazers brought her back and gave her that moment with Mo Cheeks. They gave Mo Cheeks that moment. They gave the Blazers and their fan base that moment. I couldn't have loved it more. And I just wrote a column about this that people will be able to read on Oregon Live or in the paper, but I'm a pretty cynical person. If you've read any of my columns, if you listen to this podcast, I am pretty cynical, and it's something I try to check myself on from time to time and try to be aware of, but I can't help it. And a lot of times, even something like this, I think feels staged or orchestrated or, not very pure. And this just felt really pure to me. And maybe it was the surprise element, the fact that nobody really knew it was happening, until it happened. But to see this person that I haven't, gotten a life update on in 22 years, who I remember as a 13-year-old girl on TV, who then was on the Tonight Show and CNN, to see her as a fully grown adult, a mother of two daughters, a businesswoman, stepping back into that circle and kind of getting that moment of redemption, with Mo Cheeks there. I didn't cry, but I had everything else. I had the chills. I was I thought it was beautiful, and I really have spent a lot of time this morning and last night thinking about just how nice it is to have something that just was good, pure goodness, something that we could just all love and embrace and feel gratitude for. I just realized it had been a while since I felt something like that. And it, outside of my own family, right? It just was, I don't know, my favorite moment, of the year. I just thought it was tremendous. And I just have to acknowledge that from the jump, that I thought it was, a huge win for the Blazers on a night they suffered a pretty, tough loss. But, and I do have a little bit of the backstory on how it came together that I'm happy to share. But first, I'd love to hear kind of, because you were in high school when this happened. You were probably similar age to Natalie Gilbert. She was 13 in 2003.
I don't think I was in high school yet. What year? Do you remember?
2003. It was April of 2003.
2003. So I would have been 11 years old.
Okay, so she's a little bit older than you.
Yeah, 2 years older than me. Yeah.
Do you remember this in real time?
Yes, I do. I remember it very clearly because if my memory serves me correctly, and I'm pretty sure it's correct, there was another NBA playoff game on before the Blazers game. And they actually came out of break and said, we need to show you what just happened in Portland in the other NBA playoff game. I feel very certain about that. And especially back in 2003, that's not something that's happening as much.
There weren't viral moments in
No.
2003.
No. I mean, it was just the very tip of the iceberg in terms of that sort of stuff. So, I remember it very clearly, like watching the game that was before, and all of a sudden they're showing something from Portland. I'm like, why are they showing something from Portland? And they showed that whole thing, and like that was just something that didn't really happen back then. That you cut into another broadcast with something from another game before the
Right.
game even started. So that's how impactful it was in the moment back then. That they were like, we're going to show this in the game before, during the fourth quarter of the game before, because this was so heartwarming. I gotta say, whoever's idea this was, give them all of the raises. Like, genius. A genius idea. The Blazers have had a really good week in terms of game promotional sort of stuff. You know, the Bill Walton night seemed like it was a hit. I wasn't there, but I mean, the fact that the Blazers had the idea to fly in all of his grandkids,
Yeah,
I mean,
that was
that's not
great.
cheap, by the way. That is expensive. Like, you got to fly people from all different parts of the country. You got to get hotel rooms. You got to get them to the game. Like, that's not a cheap bill. So I really applaud the Blazers for what they have done over the last week with kind of having these feel good moments, and I think they've really done that pretty well this year in a season where, you know, at the beginning we weren't really sure. We didn't think there was going to be many feel good moments on the court. There's been more than we expected.
Yeah.
But they've done a really good job at that this year of, you know, trying to make these connections. And I thought that was really outstanding. And like I said, they've had an incredible week on the game ops side. So kudos to the people who have had these ideas, because I think that it has built a lot of goodwill in this community and partnered with the fact that the Blazers have been doing better and had a competitive game last night against the Knicks, which nobody would have saw coming at the start of this season. It's very much helping their stock around these parts. So congratulations. But yeah, no, it's an iconic moment of my childhood, and I remember it extremely vividly.
So a couple of things. I do know whose idea it was, so I'm going to get to that in a second. But like, first of all, I just want to say, like, you know, I also enjoyed the Bill Walton night. I wanted even more. Like, I thought that there was meat left on the bone for what they could have done to honor Bill Walton. But what they did do, I thought, was really cool. I did connect with Luke afterwards, the next day, Luke Walton, and he was absolutely singing the praises of the Blazers organization. To your point about the family all being there, the family was, according to Luke, like was thrilled with the experience. You know, they had a full weekend in Portland. And what I'd written about going into that game was Bill Walton did not want a funeral, did not want a big memorial service. And so, you know, everybody, like the Blazers had to walk kind of a fine line of, you know, how do we honor this guy, you know, and still kind of, you know, honor his wishes and the wishes of the family. And I thought what was cool was, you know, the family hadn't all been together, everybody, really, since Bill passed. Like, I mean, they were together when he passed, and the family was kind of all in San Diego as he was sick and near the end.
Yeah.
And so they did a lot of their, like, kind of communal grieving there, is what Luke told me. But since then, because there was no service, like, the family hasn't been able to get to gather and have that celebration of life. And so the Blazers gave the Walton family that gift on Sunday, which I think is really powerful and really
incredibly
cool. So
powerful.
I mean, and you know, I have heard a lot of former Blazers, you know, well, maybe not a lot, but enough former Blazers be critical of the connection between the current team, the current franchise, and like the iterations of the past. That they don't do a great job, or historically have not done a great job of staying connected with their past. You can see them making real efforts on that front. They do have they hired a, I think it's director of alumni relations, or a title similar to that this year. They have somebody on staff whose job is to connect with the past, and so like you see Greg Oden come and sit courtside this year. You've seen, you know, a real effort with Brandon Roy in the last couple of years. You know, who knows what that's going to mean for other versions of the team's history. I think there's something happening with the 92 team or the early 90s team coming up, which is cool. That's my era. But I do applaud them for really trying to make an effort on that front. But as it relates to the Natalie Gilbert thing, this is one of those events of pure luck and organic happenstance. So I had a long conversation this morning with Natalie King, who is the Blazers vice president of corporate communications. And the way she laid it out for me was that, so Natalie Gilbert is now, an adult, like time comes for us all. And she trained as a singer. I was told as an opera singer as well. I haven't that's what the Blazers said, that she's trained as an opera singer. And then if you watched her interviews last night or read any of the interviews she did with us, with Aaron Fentress, or with The Athletic, she said that she's now working for her dad's company. She is the vice president of that company that I have here, environmental recycling.
Yeah, it was something. I watched Brooke's interview with her last night.
Environmentally conscious recycling. Yeah. And lives in Boise, but family's been longtime season ticket holders, all of that. So the company became a sponsor of the Blazers this year. So that means that they were invited to the corporate tip-off event that the Blazers do before the season, where they bring in the sponsors and, they put on, whatever, an event. So Todd Bosma, who every Blazer fan recognizes, but is the director of game ops for the Blazers. He's the guy on the court doing a lot of the in-game promotions.
Tic-tac-toe, baby.
He is the ageless wonder of Portland. He's been doing that job since I was younger than Natalie Gilbert. And
I've never told him this, but I have memories of Todd when I was a little kid because he used to run the Blazers kids camps.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I was one of 5 girls at those things. It was 200 boys and 5 girls. So I have very, very fond memories of Todd. So, yeah.
So my memory of Todd is that I was at a game in 2000 and I think I had my face painted and was the whole thing, right? I was 13 years old. And after the Blazers would win games back in those days, they would bring a player out to center court to be interviewed by originally Bill Schonely, but by then Brian Wheeler. And so there'd be a quick interview on the court, and then they would bring one fan out of the crowd to ask a question. And so Todd Bosma plucked me from the crowd and asked me to come ask Steve Smith, the 6'8" great from Michigan State, a question at center court after the game. So that was the beginning of my NBA reporting career, thanks to Todd Bosma. But Todd Bosma was emceeing this event, and he did an interview with Scoot Henderson. And when that was over, a gentleman came up to him and said, "Hey, do you remember the girl who forgot the words to the national anthem?" And Todd immediately goes, "Natalie Gilbert." And he says, "Well, that's my sister, and she's here." And so he brings her over to reintroduce her to Todd. Todd handed her the microphone to sing the anthem back in 2003. And so they reconnect, they catch up. Her name is Natalie Zito now. Yeah. And Todd said, "Would you ever be interested in singing the national anthem again?" And she said she would. The wheels were in motion. It just so happened that, obviously doing it on a night that, Mo Cheeks would be back in town made all the sense in the world. It just so happened that they were doing sort of this celebration of Portland night last night, kind of a Keep Portland Weird type theme. And so it kind of fit in because it is a celebration of Portland's past. And like you said, an iconic Blazers moment, just an iconic Blazers moment. And, if this is somehow new to you, you just have to understand, the Blazers were, in the middle of or toward the end of a really tumultuous era. Rasheed Wallace would be traded 8 months later. He was coming to the end of the Bonzi Wells era. Mo Cheeks, got to the playoffs twice, but was fired a year and a half later. This was a big moment of transition for the Blazers. There was a feeling of the fan base was starting to turn on the franchise a little bit. Yeah. Players were fighting with each other. It was a rocky time for the Blazers, even though they were, I think they were third in the West that year. All that said, the Natalie Gilbert Mo Cheeks thing, like, became like maybe the defining positive moment of, basically the post 2000, conference finals.
Yeah.
Until Brandon Roy and LaMarcus Aldridge showed up.
Yep.
So, like, this is a huge tentpole event in Blazers history, and just to recognize it and to honor it in such a pure and good way brought me incredible joy last night. Like, incredible joy. I don't know. I really do wonder if I'm like being overly sentimental about this, but like,
probably.
But the world sucks.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on that is really hard to digest. The news is bleak.
Yep.
Sports have changed, maybe not for the better. I mean, there's a lot that I like about, NIL and the transfer portal. There's a lot of real positive in that world for the players and for, student athletes, but there's a lot that has changed and has been difficult to keep up with and digest. And, the NBA, it's harder to connect with your team. Players leave way more frequently. Teams are way more transactional with their players than ever before. Tanking is rampant, all of that. And just something that like just felt pure and good. I mean, I think I probably said pure and good 6 times, but like I put a lot of weight in what the Blazers did last night. And I just give I credit all around to Natalie Zito for, I mean, she's a trained singer who's performed in large venues. Like she said on the broadcast last night that she probably hadn't performed in front of that many people in 15 years. Well, that would mean that like, that's not 2003. I mean, she's gone on to a real like, performing career. And so, but I do think it took courage to do this again, to step back onto the court and do that. And I think it really just was a reminder of what grace and leadership Mo Cheeks showed in that moment.
Yeah.
And how remarkable she was in that moment to persist and to carry on and finish the song. So I couldn't love it more. And I could fill an entire hour of this podcast talking about it.
Yeah, I just want to say one more thing, in that, one of the things that really warmed my heart about it actually was watching the look on Mo Cheeks' face as she was singing the national anthem. It was like, oh yes, because I loved Mo Cheeks growing up. Like, I don't know, I was like devastated when they fired him. And so to see him now, an older guy with the salt and pepper hair and everything, it just kind of felt like a proud grandpa, like watching her. And it was just so heartwarming to see how happy he was, because you could just, it was radiating from him that it really, really impacted him getting to watch her sing again. So that was just something that really, I really put it over the top for me personally.
Well, and you're talking about someone who is a Hall of Famer as a player, who has been a head coach in 3 places, has been involved in the game of basketball at the professional level for coming up on 50 years. And it's obviously not like first line obituary stuff, but it might be second paragraph obituary stuff, what he did with Natalie Gilbert.
Yep.
And you never know if a moment like that is going to come full circle. Like what we already experienced is the end of the story, right? That they had this moment, they went on a little bit of a press tour, and then everybody went on with their lives. What a fitting coda to that story that they were able to come back together in Portland on the floor, that she was able to absolutely shred the national anthem and just have that moment. I loved it. Yeah. This does lead me to a question that I'm curious about, Brenna, just because we've both been to so many sporting events.
Oh boy.
I'm putting you on the spot here, so you may not have a good answer.
Oh yeah.
Have there been any like notable national anthem moments for you? Like notable performers, notable flubs, anything that comes to mind? Because I have a couple.
I bet you would have more than I do because of working in the NBA for so long. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. That does not mean that I haven't been there in some moments that have been interesting, but I can't think of anything off the top of my head. In general, I think sports journalists are some of the most patriotic people in the country because we have to listen to national anthems over and over again. And I just...
But sports reporters complain about the national anthem a lot too.
Oh yeah, no. That's what I mean. Is that we just I don't know. I have unpopular opinions about it.
I've heard. I mean, there's plenty of people who have questions about whether it makes sense for this like display of patriotic pageantry before every sporting event. Like we don't do it before every event in our lives. You go to the theater, they don't do it, but you know, it's something that we've established as part of the pastime, and I'm fine with it. I enjoy it. Like, and like occasionally it leads to moments like this. Like, you know, I'm with it, but I'm just trying to think like, so when I covered the Lakers, like you would occasionally get like a really big performer. And like, there have been a couple of those. Like I remember like when Kobe's last game, Flea did the national anthem. And like absolutely crushed it. Like Flea did it on the trumpet a couple of times, you know. So I mean, things like that. I remember the Lakers did Pride Night one year, and Orville Peck came out and sang the national anthem. Do you know Orville Peck?
Yeah, yeah.
He's the alt country guy who like keeps his face covered, and so like his true identity is unknown. And he walked by to go out to do the national anthem, and this was, you know, whatever, 7 years ago or something like that. Maybe not quite that long ago, but you know, nobody else around me knew who Orville Peck was. And I was like, this is a huge get for the Lakers on Pride Night. And it was really cool. And, you know, to have a front row seat to that one. But the one I wanted to get to here is I was present for another really notable national anthem.
Can I guess?
Flub. Go for it.
Fergie.
No. Was I at that one? She did really poorly. Was that at a Clippers game?
It was at an All-Star game.
In Houston?
I don't remember.
I think I was there for that one. Hold on, Google.
Oh, see? I'm so glad I may have reminded you of another one. Yeah. I was like, I bet you he was there for Fergie. The national anthem of the 2018
All-Star game. Where was the 2008? That's the LA national? Yes, I was at that. That was the LA All-Star game.
There we go.
Yes, I was there. Wow, I forgot about that. Okay, so I was there for Fergie. What did she do? It was just horrible.
She really, really riffed it to the point where it was laughable and funny. She was really going off on her own tangent during the national anthem. Let's put it that way.
I have repressed that memory, but it is back now. Thank you. Okay, so
glad.
Good poll. Great poll. I was there. The one that I was there for, though, that is more relevant to this particular conversation. In 2018, I'm at the Brooklyn Nets game. Okay, Lakers Nets, Barclays Center, and the national anthem singer makes it basically to the Rockets' red glare, and then says a couple of words wrong, and stops. Deer in the headlights stops. 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, a million seconds. Like a staffer kind of comes over and like says a couple of things to her, like maybe trying to give her the lyrics, but then walks away. This was not a Mo Cheeks like embrace situation. She takes a really deep breath. You can see how like flustered she is. She takes a really deep breath. She starts at the beginning and makes it through. That anthem singer on that night was Wicked star Cynthia Erivo.
Shut up.
No, it's on YouTube.
Amazing.
Now she is British. She did not grow up being indoctrinated by this song the way that we all have. And so, but she had just been in a really terrible movie, like Murder at the Casa Royale or something, like Royale, Cynthia. And so I knew her from that. But she was already Bad Times at the El Royale.
Yeah,
she was already like a massive star of Broadway. She'd already won an Emmy, Grammy, and a Tony. So she was already 75% of the way to the EGOT. She was a massive star of screen and film, stage and film, stage and screen, whatever I'm trying to say, screen and stage. And it happened to her. And like, it didn't go nearly as viral. It didn't have nearly the legs of Natalie Gilbert's. And now, obviously, Natalie Gilbert's didn't just go viral because she messed up. It went viral because of what Mo Cheeks did.
Yes.
And in a sense, there's almost like sort of like a unintended consequence of Mo coming forward to like give her that comfort and support, where it like really did like push it into a much bigger story than it might have otherwise been. And to hear Natalie Gilbert talk about it after the fact, and like she talks about getting bullied and hazed. She told Jason Quick, our friend with The Athletic, that she would eat her lunch in a bathroom stall just to get away from kids who were bullying her because of this. And it's just like, it's so wrong on so many levels. And then to see like the strength that she brought to it again last night. So anyway, I just find it really compelling that, this has happened to other people and it could happen to anyone. If it can happen to Cynthia Erivo, it can happen to you. It can happen to any of us. And maybe that's my takeaway from all of this. That's not my takeaway. My takeaway is that there's goodness all around, and sometimes it's hard to find, and other times it walks out onto center court and smacks you in the face with a powerful rendition of the national anthem.
Sorry, all I'm thinking about now is Fergie. So great,
come back, Brenna. Come back.
Great national anthem. Another viral moment during the national anthem that did bring some goodness to the world at the expense of others, but there was. I mean, it was a funny moment. A lot of people got some good laughs.
Fergalicious what?
Yep. That's it.
Okay.
Should we talk about last night?
Sure.
Do we want to?
Yeah, go for it.
I mean, okay. First of all, I quite literally walked into my office as the Knicks hit the game winner. Because I'm at state basketball all week.
You missed all the best parts.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. I was keeping tabs. I was at the state tournament. I was like, wait, they're actually like in this? Like, what? I understand that we need a little bit more time, and like I said, I did not watch the game in totality. I understand that Scoot missed some free throws that he should have made,
but he made him down. He made him down the stretch to get to overtime.
He did. But if we're talking about redemption arcs, Scoot Henderson is one of them this season.
I agree,
to say the least. It's been the last 2 months for him. He has proven people wrong, and I am quite honestly enjoying it because I never really understood people already labeling him as a bust after year one. I get it. He made the quip at Media Day about the food and all that sort of stuff, and everybody. Do you remember that?
I do. What did you like? What did you like about your first year in the NBA or something like that? And
it was the food? Said, the food or whatever.
Yeah. What was the best part of being in the NBA? The food? Yeah, something. Yeah.
And unfortunately, he didn't deliver it in a way that really landed.
Yeah.
So I get it. Everybody piles on, blah, 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 blah. Quite honestly, I think because of that, like the bust narrative becomes even stronger because there's this weird viral moment of him saying that he enjoyed the food. And everyone's like, oh, like, what's going on with this kid, Even though he was obviously joking and it just didn't land. But I never understood people labeling somebody a bust a year or a year and a half in. At the age that he is at.
I would like to defend this just a little bit.
Yeah,
and because I mean, it's very, if you Google Scoot Henderson bust, somewhere high on the Google results, you're going to see a story from me from January that was, is Scoot Henderson busting out or just a bust? And because he was turning it on at that point, but like professional basketball evaluators had and still have, by the way. It's not like everybody's just decided he's a star. But bust also becomes very relative to, bust is a very loaded and very vicious word. I recognize that. It also is relative to like expectations and what the team has invested in you and expects you to be. And the Blazers drafted Scoot to be a star. And I will concede that if the first year and a half of his tenure had looked like the last 2 months have looked like, No questions. He looks like he's on that path, and great for him. Like, awesome, and great for the Blazers. But he was not finishing at the rim. He was not shooting the ball well. He was not much of a threat offensively. He wasn't really setting up his teammates. And then, you're right. Like, something has absolutely clicked. And what I loved about last night's game, he was getting to the rim and finishing. Even through this stretch where he's been shooting the ball well and he's like really been a threat from three, like shooting at one of the best 3-point shooting percentages in the league since January. He really mixed in some strong rim finishing and it's against a really good Knicks team, by the way, that has great defenders. Mikal Bridges, Karl Anthony Towns is not a great defender, but is a real, can do some damage at the rim.
Body.
And that's just, and Josh Hart, obviously.
I saw that play against Josh Hart where he just dribbled and finally got to the basket.
But like, I feel like there have been so many times this year where Scoot has like, gone toward the rim and then just been smothered. And it's just time and again, you're like, he can't do anything once he gets within 5 feet of the rim. He doesn't, and that last night was incredibly encouraging because he was finishing and making difficult shots. He was, he was going up strong and getting fouled. He dunked. Like one of the big things with Scoot is like, hey, where's the guy who in the G League was like dunking on everybody? He's dunked only it was something like 13 times in his career before last night. Like that has not been part of his game. And so, I do feel like Scoot has had a bit of a breakthrough. And, with another summer, another off season of training, like he should be the starting point guard in Deed and Title next year. And, that probably means moving on from Anthony Simons. But, I've said that for a year now, so who knows when it'll actually happen. But I think Scoot has shown that he's ready for that next level of responsibility. And I give him tons of kudos, the staff that has worked with him. This is one of the things that you have to give Chauncey Billups credit for. If you ding a coach for a lack of player development, then you have to give them the credit when a player does develop and a player does emerge. Scoot's not doing it on his own. So all of that about Scoot, yes. I mean, by the way, to the point about finishing at the rim, I've never seen Denny Advia get blocked so many times. Like Denny had a great line last night. He played well, other than 7 turnovers, but he was getting absolutely, smothered as well. And that's not something I've seen from him this year. Like he usually is able to finish or at least, have, or get a shot up at the rim. He wasn't finishing and Scoot was. So, one game that we're talking about, but like you don't want to cherry pick like the bad and you don't want to cherry pick the good. Yeah. But I was really encouraged by the way he played against a really good defensive team. And, the win would have been nice. We're at a point now where the wins don't hurt you and the losses don't help you. And so, the Blazers are just sort of, the chips are going to fall where they may. There's a little bit of wiggle room in the lottery standings, but not enough that you're letting that drive anything. So, at this point, wins are better for you because of what you gain from them in terms of spirit, culture, the lessons that come out of them. But just going head to head and toe to toe with that Knicks team and playing well enough to win, because they did play well enough to win. Mikal Bridges, make or miss, right? It's a make or miss league. Like the Blazers easily could have won that game and we'd be giving them all sorts of praise. Like they deserve no less or no more praise because they lost than if they had won.
Nobody likes a moral victory, but it was definitely a moral victory last night.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And, but all that said, the Blazers still face the same big question that we've been asking all year long, which is who's going to be the number one option on this team when they're ready to go. Like, do they have that person or not? I would submit that they still don't. That they have a lot of really good role players right now, and like number 2, number 3 option type guys. But like they still need that guy, and you are until you find that star, you are in a rebuild. You are still in a rebuild until you find your star, and that's where the Blazers are.
You have 3 guys in Denny, Scoot, and Shaden who could all go off at any time, but also could all have quiet games.
Correct.
And you need somebody who is reliable 20, 25 points every night, and that is not someone they have on their roster currently.
I would agree with that. They have starters.
Yep.
They have 4 starters, and they have no star.
Yep.
You know, with the caveat that there's room for Shaden to still take another step. But even if Shaden gets there, he still feels like the second all-star on a team. Like, I still don't see him as a number one option on a good team. But man, the talent's there, and he's been playing terrific lately. So I don't want not minimizing him.
How do you get a big star right now? Not through the draft, because as we have discussed ad nauseum on this podcast, the Blazers aren't signing a big-time free agent. And yet you also do not want to trade Scoot, Shaden, Tumani, Denny right now. Those are untouchable.
I would agree. Right? I completely agree. I mean, did you say Shaden or no?
I did say Shaden.
Okay. I think Shaden's an interesting question. Just
because, I agree with you.
Because the Blazers do have the opportunity to extend him starting in October, and then otherwise are staring down the barrel of restricted free agency, which is not that scary in the modern landscape. But like, how much do you want to pay Shaden Sharp is reflective of like how much you value him, and you know what slot you see him occupying on your team. Like, you can't give him max money if he's not your number one player. Yep. I don't think he has shown yet that like that's where he should be. But to answer your question, the Blazers have the assets to go get a guy. And, you know, whether it's, you know, it's they have the draft picks, you know, like the Milwaukee Bucks 2029 unprotected first is a very valuable draft pick as an asset. And it's probably more valuable as a trade chip than it will actually be as a pick. So, you know, they should take advantage of that when and if the moment is right.
Yes.
And so then you look around the league and you say, okay, who's a star who you could potentially go get who would fit with your timeline and take you to that next level? And there's not a lot of obvious candidates.
It's one of the big problems.
Zion Williamson exists. There's some obvious questions there, but I also think Zion Williamson could probably be acquired for less than, you know, like Kevin Durant, right? Even though Kevin Durant's old, like the bounty of picks that you see going out for these real like stars, like I think that Zion Williamson is a bit of a distressed asset, just given his injury history. Could you do something with New Orleans where you part with some of your future picks, you know, match the salary by including your Jeremy Grant or something like that? That'd be amazing. Or DeAndre Ayton, and you take back Zion, who's on a similar timeline to your young guys, and would fit on the floor. That I am hard pressed to come up with another name in terms of current stars who could be tradable. But maybe there are others, and I'm just not thinking of them. You know, like, I think it's a really small list because everybody else seems pretty locked into their situation. Like either they're part of a winning situation and would want to stay, or they're part of a team on the upswing. And Zion's kind of in this place where it's, you know, the situation has never felt perfect, and that team has made a couple of runs at it and has not been able to, you know, gain any traction. Like, do they come for Portland's picks and let him come here? So I don't know. That's one name that I keep thinking about, but that would be the answer of how you do it if it's not through the draft, because the plan was to stink and to be in a great position to get one of those top 3 or 4 picks. And, you know, it's still possible, but the math isn't on their side.
So I'm just looking at Twitter right now to see if our friend Cooper Flagg is
he okay?
How he's doing.
Yeah, I saw this.
He walked through the handshake line. So that's a good sign, I would say.
He didn't hobble.
He didn't hobble. I'm watching the video right now. I mean, he wasn't going fast through the handshake line.
He didn't sprint through the handshake line.
No. There was no sprinting to be had, man. They like literally panned down and got a shot of his ankle as he was going through the handshake line. Amazing. But, you know, as I said, or you get extremely lucky and you just draft Cooper Flagg, and then you're good. Then you're good. Then you I mean, what? That's a pretty fun starting lineup. But it seems unlikely at this point, but unlikelier things have happened.
That's true. I mean, listen, it is certainly should be of at least some comfort to Blazers fans that Atlanta jumped to number 1 from the 9 last year. Now, is that something that you can count on happening again? Absolutely not. But you do need to see what happens in this lottery before you start ruling out that possibility or thinking about, making a huge trade, because getting into the top 4 remains in play, and there are probably 4 players that you'd be pretty excited to draft in this draft. And maybe there's more for the Blazers. They're currently 9th. That gives them a 20% chance at a top 4 pick. 20% isn't bad. I mean, it is what Scoot Henderson was shooting from 3 when I wrote my Buster busting out piece, but I'm kidding. I don't actually think it was 20%, but he was struggling. He was on the struggle bus. So I do want to touch on the Big Ten tournament, the Big Ten men's basketball tournament, and we also have to talk women's hoops because something awesome happened for this state this week. So let me actually start with that because it's huge. Remember last year on this podcast, we were like, could Portland play Oregon State in the NCAA tournament? Because the Pilots were, were the WCC champions. We didn't know where they were going to get seated and slotted and sent. Oregon State obviously got to host. So like, how cool would it be if UP went to Corvallis and played a tournament game at Gill? That didn't happen. But instead, we get a WCC championship game between the 2 in-state teams. The Beavers are, biding their time in the WCC right now. I mean, you've covered the Pilots a lot. I know that's Heartbreak City for them. But how cool for Scott Ruick's program, after losing pretty much all the big names and familiar faces from last year's Elite 8 team, and really struggled early in the year, did not look like it was going to be a winning ball club, frankly. That to find its footing, go into the WCC tournament as the 4 seed. Is that right? 4? Yes. And then and knock off number 1 Gonzaga and number 2 UP. Win on buzzer beaters, by the way, in the first 2 games of the tournament, and then pull away from the Pilots. I mean, just I'm on a train of goodness today. I think Natalie Gilbert has done this to me. Everything is possible. Everything is possible and positive right now. But I think it's terrific. Like the transfer portal, NIL, absolutely shivved the OSU women's basketball program. And it felt like an absolute tragedy. And it was. And this program is nowhere near where it was at the end of last season. But to get back to this point, to be back in the field, is such a testament to the resolve and character of that program. And I think it's just awesome. Awesome. Everything's good. Everything. It's all I feel like Bill Walton today. It's all good. It's I'm the luckiest man on earth. I feel like I'm soaking up part of the vibes of Bill Walton night, Natalie Gilbert night, Oregon State and UP in the NCAA tournament. Oregon just beat Indiana in the men's tournament and is looking even stronger as a top 5 seed. Come next week, come Selection Sunday. The Blazers have hope. What's not to like right now? Is it sunny outside? The sun is. It was raining this morning, and I see sun coming through my window right now.
This is beautiful. I'm just taking this in.
I feel like the moment
and catching all the infectious vibes.
It's like when the Grinch's heart grew 9 sizes.
Yeah.
Is this the inflection point of my entire life where Bill sheds his cynical cloak and becomes just this ray of positivity in everyone's life?
Well, I'm so glad I'm getting to witness it in real time. Yeah. No, I mean, I think the coolest thing for me watching that Oregon State UP game, which was a objectively bad game, by the way.
Correct.
But the coolest thing for me was just watching the celebration of Oregon basketball going on out on that court. You had 5 players between the 2 teams who were born and raised here, playing out there. Some playing more key roles than others, but I mean, both starting point guards from here. I don't know what's up with point guards in our state, but we do have a pretty good collection of them between,
no kidding.
Mikkel, Kennedy, Jackson. I mean, Donovan Hunter at TCU right now. TCU had an incredible year.
How about Josiah Lake at Oregon State too?
Yes.
A contemporary of Jackson Shelstad who walked on for the Beavers, earned a scholarship, and has just been. I mean, I know their season is not moving toward the NCAA tournament, obviously, but was nails for this Beavers team this year. So I mean, you're right across the board.
if we're expanding it to just guards in general, I mean, then you got to talk about Allie Schimmel too.
Yep.
And, a 3A kid walking onto Oregon and playing, or Oregon State and playing 30 minutes in the WCC championship game.
Yeah.
Like, incredibly cool stuff. So, I don't know what's in the water for guards in this state right now, but we got it. And just, seeing the legacy of George Fox play out as well. Yeah. Between those two coaches, obviously very Scott was at George Fox, and then Meek took over right after him, and now they're both battling it out like this. I just thought was such a cool ode to that basketball program and what they have accomplished at the D3 level. So, just one of those things where it was really incredible to watch play out. And Scott had a really good bite about it after the game, in which he talked about Barry Adams, legendary high school head coach.
First job was at Nestucca High School, took the Bobcats to their only boys basketball state championship game.
Well, there you go.
Like 1962, 1963, Go Cats.
Now that's a name I haven't heard in a really long time. Used to be in Oregon.
If you have not heard the name Nestucca in a long time, I'm clearly not talking about my alma mater enough on this podcast.
Yeah, you aren't, apparently. So yeah, I think that was my biggest takeaway. Everybody around the Pilots is pretty disappointed about the fact that they aren't going to even get a sniff for an NCAA tournament bid. And I would count, and I said this last night at UP during the state tournament, it stinks that you guys aren't getting a sniff. And it also, and if you guys aren't getting a sniff, imagine how much it stinks for, I'm just going to be frank, Gonzaga not getting a sniff, drank.
Peep the sweater.
Yep.
If you're watching on YouTube, you've already noticed. If you're not, you can guess what the sweater says.
But, Gonzaga did beat UP both times this season. Mm-hmm. So, it's unfortunate that the WCC is going to be looked at as a one-bid league this year. When I think they have a lot of really fun teams, even outside Gonzaga and UP. I mean, that was a fun tournament.
Yep.
A really fun tournament on the women's side. So It's unfortunate, but, I think the other thing is that everybody was acting as if UP's season was over. And yes, they're not going to the NCAA tournament, but objectively, they could actually end up playing a lot longer.
Yeah, totally.
They are, let's be frank, the last 2 years, it was one and done. And it probably would have been that situation this year as well with UP if they would have made it.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can go to the WNIT and you could really actually make a fun run.
Yeah.
So, I know it's disappointing, but I think it actually might end up leading to something bigger for their team. And a good foundation for next year, in which, by the way, they're losing all of their starters. So yeah, but for Oregon State, just an amazing thing, and I'm going to be in Spokane for the women's regional, and I am really hoping that USC and UCLA are there.
Yeah.
Because I really cannot wait to talk to Talia and Tamia.
Yeah.
About OSU's success this year.
Yeah.
And because I think it does mean a lot to them. Talia shared it on her Instagram story immediately after Oregon State won. Yeah. She shared a graphic onto her story. So I think it does, even though, yes, they left. And I know that's, one of the things that Scott said is that, he said in his post-game press conference, he says, I don't have hard feelings towards them because they were put in an impossible situation as well. I was put in an impossible situation and they were put in an impossible situation. So I really have never had ill will towards them.
Yeah.
Because I understand that this was not easy for anybody involved. So I think that, those players still have a lot of love for this program. And it's definitely one of the more heartwarming stories of the year that Oregon State was able to make it back and able to get through everything that they did.
That's all really well said, Brenna, and I couldn't agree more. And this has been the ultimate heartwarming episode of the Oregonian Sports Podcast. We actually have to get out of here. We have a hard out at noon, but I did want to just touch on the Oregon men real quickly. after beating Indiana today. Their path in the Big Ten tournament. They play Michigan State tomorrow at noon. Tomorrow being Friday, depending on when you're listening to this. They could be looking at UCLA, Wisconsin in the semis if they get past Michigan State, but that's going to be a tough task. But really, right now, the Oregon men playing with house money. Their regular season schedule and results kind of speak for themselves. They're locked in as an at-large with a good seed. So look for them to be favored in the NCAA tournament. We will probably be back to talk to you after Selection Sunday, so we will know a little bit more about what the next couple weeks might look like for the local teams. But in the meantime, thank you so much for listening to the Oregonian Sports Podcast, for supporting the journalism of the Oregonian, Oregon Live, and Brenna Greene's Coin 6. And check out the column I have up today about the Natalie Gilbert Zito reunion with Mo Cheeks. Brenna, I believe that this is tonic for our tumultuous times and the kind of good news and happy story and full circle moment that we all need. So please check that out. And Brenna, I'm going to talk to you next week. Thanks so much for being part of this today and always.
Thank you very much. Next week, the best week of the year. Let's get it.
We agree on that.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back.